What legal considerations do you need for your MSP, whether you are new or even slightly seasoned? Now, I say slightly seasoned because if you are a veteran in the industry, you've had your business for a while, you probably already have all of this stuff in place. So, I'm going to be covering what you need to have, why you need to have it, and ultimately everything that I've learned over the years, especially consulting with experts and professionals. Before I get into it, my name is Harrison Barron from growth-generators.com. We help MSPs grow, whether it's sales training, marketing training, or even some business operations. Before I get into today's video, I do want to mention just two really quick things. Number one, if you're looking for resources on how to grow your MSP, we have a bunch of them over at growth-generators.com/resources. You'll see a tab up here on the top of the website, and you could scroll down and see all of the free resources that you can get, from sales sheets to pricing training to SEO checklists to landing your free clients, or first clients, I should say, for free blog post templates, and so much more. We work tremendously hard. We're working on a new battle card. It'll be in there very soon for you to grab that as well. And other than that, if you want to come hang out with us in the Discord, I couldn't recommend it more. It is just a truly amazing group of people. It's called the MSP Heroes Discord. There are so many people in here constantly chatting, looking to grow their business. I jump in as often as I can. I hung out in here for a little while this evening. But if you have questions, topics that you want to cover, you're looking for technical advice, I would highly recommend checking it out. You can join it for free, growth-generators.com/Discord. Now, before I get into this video, I have to say something wildly specific because it is important for me to cover my own butt. Hey, before we dive in, I want to make it clear that I am not a lawyer and this video is for informational purposes only. While I am covering some important legal considerations for starting an MSP, every business is unique and laws can vary depending on your location. Be sure to consult with a qualified attorney or legal professional to get tailored advice for your specific situation. Now, let's get started. I know it's funny and I have to do it because, God forbid, I don't want somebody coming back and saying, this is what you have to do. The first thing is we have to figure out what business structure we actually want to consider. Now, there are pros and cons to all of these depending on what you're actually looking to do. Here in the United States, we have typically about four main ones. We have an LLC, limited liability corporation, a S corporation, a partnership, a sole proprietorship, and then there's also C Corp, which is another one. And there's a couple other kind of entities that I know of. I don't know too much about them, but typically everybody falls in those. Now, there's pros and cons for every single one of them, especially depending on where you're located. Now, I do know that the majority of the subscribers, the 50-ish% that are subscribed, we appreciate you, are located in the United States. The other 50% are located around the world. Depending on where you're at, you have to look into what you actually need and what's right for you. I don't want to say that there's something better than another thing, but forming a corporation, regardless of where you are, is usually going to be the best thing. And all of them play into different tax structures. They play into different liability. It basically creates a separation between you and your assets and the business. So if something happens in the business, it does protect you in one way or another. That is, once again, not legal advice, but that is most of the time. But you want to pick what truly works for you, and that's really why it's super important. Not only should you consult a legal professional, but also one of the best resources I have ever found is a very good accountant. My accountant is truly one of the best in my opinion. He gives me so much good information. He has explained up and down why we have an S Corp. I couldn't tell you why, but he tries to explain it to me, and I do my best to understand it. I say that lovingly and kiddingly. I do know why, but truly, he has explained why we're doing certain things so that way I can understand it. And if I challenge him, he knows the answers to come back to me. So it's really important to go out and understand those things for your own business. Now, what licensing and certifications do we actually need here? So depending on where you're at, once again, state, local, federal regulations you might need to, or certifications you may very well need. In most cases, IT companies kind of slip under the radar until they start getting into regulatory agencies. That could be HIPAA, FINRA, the list goes on and on. You guys already know I love the alphabet agencies. There is more money typically involved in those, but truly, you might have to meet certain requirements for your MSP business. Once again, depending on where you're at, there may be certain requirements, but for the most part, you could go help a local coffee shop, a local small business with their technology typically pretty quickly after forming a corporation and watching this video, because there's some other things that you want to consider throughout this process. But keep in mind, depending on what you're actually going into, once again, those regulatory agencies, you may very well need certain certifications, certain licensing to get access to certain areas, especially if you're working in potentially CMMC, potentially top secret environments, anything like that. You will need certain certifications for that as well. But what else do you actually need? Because this is only the tip of the iceberg here. We need to come up with some contracts and agreements. These are better off suited to do early than later and kind of scramble for them, because once again, I would recommend getting a lawyer involved. And I've heard MSAs and SLAs, which I'm about to talk about, varying from as little as 5 pages all the way up to about 20 pages plus in length. But it's important to have a legal contract for your business. This is going to help cover your butt, CYA, cover your whatever that A word is that you want to think about. But truly, I say that lovingly, we need to make sure that we are covered, but also it helps the customer too. It helps show that, hey, I need this, or I need to focus on this. These are important things that they need to know about your business, and you need to know what is required of it, and it helps actually build a better business relationship. You need terms and conditions in many cases. I just needed to add a fulfillment document on my website. Now, that's for payment processing, but these are important things to consider and things that you might want to get ahead of time, truly. And then last but not least, a liability clause and limitations of that. Some of these your insurance company may have, some of these you might need to speak to your attorney about and your legal professional about, but it's important to just speak to the appropriate entities and get the ball rolling. In the beginning, you really need an SLA, a service level agreement. You could also have an MSA. Some terms and conditions never hurt, but making sure it's clearly defined and your customers know what's included and what's not included is important. Next is going to be some cybersecurity. You may very well deal with some important information. Heck, I almost hope that you do, because that means you're closing deals. But there are key laws and regulations MSPs absolutely need to follow, and that is GDPR, CCPA, the California Protection Act, I forget what the C is, HIPAA, FTC safeguard rules. There are a good handful of those rules, as well as additional rules that you may or may not have in your area. Once again, do your homework. I cannot stress it enough. But you have to know that they're there, and you have to know what is required of your MSP. And I hate to be super vague, but when you're making a video for the entire world, it is a bit challenging when it comes to these things. And you have to make sure that not only are you compliant when you start, you maintain that compliance through the entire time. If you're dealing with HIPAA compliance or you have HIPAA related information, you have to make sure that you are also HIPAA You were following the guidelines of HIPAA until you no longer have any data and you no longer have customers in that space. It is really, really important. And if there's any cybersecurity regulations that you need to follow, not only do you follow them, but you follow them to a T. And more often than not, you have to document that entire process. Thankfully, there's software that helps with that, but truly it's important. Now, the worst thing, the thing that truly costs, in my opinion, a ton of money, and the thing that nobody ever likes to spend money on, insurance. Now, I shouldn't say recently, it's been a little while, but I've done a video on insurance in the past. What do you actually need? You need typically general liability. It's also important to consider cyber liability insurance and just good business practice, E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance. It is important to have those things. How much coverage is enough? This is a great question for, you guessed it, an expert. I am not an insurance person, but truly talk to an insurance person. Find out what you may or may not have. A basic policy might be not that expensive. Yeah, it might run you $1,000 or so, but just having that insurance, that coverage, God forbid you needed it, is super, super important. Keep in mind, businesses are giving us the keys to the castle. It is truly important that we take the appropriate steps to make sure that not only they're safe, that we're safe. And if something does happen, truly, we could cost companies tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the size and depending on what kind of company it truly is. So how much coverage is enough? Once again, an insurance professional would happily answer that. In the beginning stages, you're probably not closing 100+ person companies or these mega conglomerate companies, and that's okay. That's fine. That's actually probably not a bad thing. But as time goes on, you're going to have to crank up that insurance just in case you actually need it. And it's important to know about these things. Now, what other things do you need? In the beginning, that's almost it, but there are some other kind of important areas to cover in this video, and I'm going to ask you to hit that like button, that subscribe button, and that notification bell. We have employee and contractor agreements. More often than not, if you're just starting out, you may want to subcontract other companies. It's important to have an employee contract. It's important to have a contractor agreement. Those things are important to have. You might use them in different scenarios, and that's good. You may also need NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. Now, there's a whole bunch of things, at least going on in the United States, about non-competes. Once again, your own rules and regulations. You have to be careful about that. There's a whole bunch that goes into that. But there are some things that you have a non-disclosure agreement about. They are usually highly enforceable if they can track it. And there is sometimes, depending on the severity of it, some really important things in there to the point where you might not even be able to tell your spouse or family about it. Truly, an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. They're extremely serious in the business world. I have seen them enforced and people lose, ironically enough, their shirt, right? It is something to not mess around with. And there are some clients that I've had and worked with that said, hey, even before we start talking, I need an NDA. I don't even want to open the front door for you to come in and look at everything until there's an NDA signed, because they don't want to give out their secret sauce. They don't want me going and talking about whatever it is. It is not that uncommon, and save those. There is usually a statute of limitations. There's a limit on how long they can actually be, but it is important. Truthfully, people just want to protect their businesses and make sure things don't get out on the public internet or in the public eye as well. And then last but not least, intellectual property rights. And this one is really important. Your IP, as most people call it, is really important. Your secret sauce, the stack that you use and how you implement it, is your IP. And it's important to protect that and value that, because that's what gives you the advantage versus everybody else. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go implement IP rules in your business right this second, but it is important to truly understand IP. Stealing other people's ideas, grabbing other people's ideas, leveraging them, taking them as your own. It is truly important. And then last but not least, regardless of employees or contractors, define roles clearly. This is more of a, yes, it's going to help your business, but truthfully, it's going to help you keep a heck of a lot more hair on your head. I cannot tell you how many times a bad business deal happens because the roles were not clearly stated right off the rip. Now, what other IP things do we need to consider, right? We have that software, but maybe we even customize that software. That is also your IP. What other things can you protect? You can trademark your business name. You can trademark your logo. You can also have copyright considerations for any content or tools that you end up creating. Those are important things to consider. Now, you might not be thinking about it on day one, but as time goes on, there might be certain things that you build, that you create, that your business uses exclusively. And if it gets leaked or stolen in one way or another, that could really cripple your business. And it's yours. You are entitled to it. You built it. Even if you paid employees for building it, they are your employees. They are a part of the business entity, and in which case that is still usually considered the business's IP. Once again, check with your local laws and a legal professional for this. I am not a lawyer. This is just things that I've found on the internet after speaking to hundreds of other professionals. And then last but not least, we have to make sure that we do the worst of the two things. One, once again, those agreements are wildly important, but the least favorite one, and I left this all the way to the end because there are only two things guaranteed in life. And if you guessed death and taxes, you would be 100% correct. Regardless of the business that you set up, The government wants its slice. You're going to need, in the United States, it's called an EIN number, a employee identification number. You need that to go set up a business bank account, which is wildly important. But guess what? You're going to have to pay sales tax. Depending on what it is, it could be state tax, federal tax. It doesn't matter. Just get used to shaving off a little bit of your money and sending it to the government. I'm pretty sure that's standard in every country out there, but you have to make sure that you pay the right taxes, because I don't want somebody to come back to this video and say, Harrison, I tried to avoid taxes. Now, there is ways that you can help minimize the amount of taxes that you pay, but at the end of the day, the government wants their slice of it. Work with an accountant that is familiar, hopefully, with the MSP business. When you're really starting out and you're really, really small, you could work with a lot of great accountants out there. And as you scale and scale and scale, you really want to focus heavily on a MSP focused accountant to give you the insight that you truly, truly need. But taxes, trust me, they stink. Make sure you put money away for taxes. The last thing you want to do is be in the hole owing the government money, because trust me, if there's anybody that doesn't forget about money, it is the government. And other than that, there's just some common pitfalls I just want to help you avoid by going through this, because it is important. Make sure you update your contracts regularly. I cannot tell you how many MSPs I've talked to. They build their MSA years and years and years prior, and then all of a sudden they forget about updating. They forget about updating their contracts. They forget about updating their NDAs. They forget about updating their regulatory status and making sure that things are fully in compliance. It is important. I'm not saying you have to do this every week. I'm not saying you have to do this every month, but this is something that you should check, just like your smoke detectors, because I am a fireman. Every year, you should just look at your contracts. Doesn't mean you have to tweak anything, but things do change, and it is important to stay ahead of the game, because the last thing you want to do is say, things are going everywhere. That is the last thing you want. So I hope you guys found some value in this video. Please, please, please get your contracts in place, get your business set up, and start crushing it. I have a truly amazing video tomorrow that I don't want you to miss, and it is very serious about what's currently happening right now. And if you know this channel, I don't talk about hot topics that are currently happening right now, but I don't want you to miss this one, because this is wildly important as you build your MSP business. Love you guys as always. Like button, subscribe button, notification bell. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.